Our top 5 transfers. We are doing Division 1 to Division 1 only. So our apologies to friend of the program, Duncan Robinson, for example, who transferred from whatever that boarding school was that he that he was at in the middle of nowhere. Or guy like JUCO guys like Larry Johnson would have been on my list if we were doing JUCO guys. But we are not. We are doing guys that were on Division 1 teams transferred to other Division 1 teams. Also, I want to say, just to throw this out there, Larry Bird is not on my list. I did not count Larry Bird.
Never played at Indiana. Should not count.
He never played. List. So I felt like Larry Bird was cheating. So if you're listening and you say, I have Titus figured out, of course Larry Bird is going to be number 1. You're right. He would have been, but it feels like cheating. All right, Tate, I will, as always, let you go first. Who's number 5 for you on your list?
Number 5, Billy McCaffrey, one of the earliest Duke defectors, a man that scored 16 points in the final in 1991. He said, I'm tired of Coach K yelling at me. I'm tired of being the 4th option on this team. I'm bigger than this. I want to get the basketball. I want to have fun playing basketball because I'm playing for a diabolical menace right now. And his name is Mike Krzyzewski. Get me out of here. Take me to Vanderbilt. Billy McCaffrey does not get the back-to-back championships. He leaves Duke before they go for the 1992 title. But he does go to Vanderbilt. He goes to a couple, or at least one Sweet 16, I believe, and was averaging 16 points a game and was just having a great time playing the game of basketball.
That was Stalin's first year, right? He got
100%. Yeah, that was a big gift for Kevin Stallings. Yeah, young Kevin Stallings. He's like, yeah, come on in here.
Yeah, Billy McCaffrey. He was the OG Duke defector. At least that's how I remember it. All right, number 5 for me is Wesley Johnson, also known as Wes Johnson, Iowa State to Syracuse. He was the first guy that I remember. This is kind of embarrassing, but whatever, it's true. He's the first guy that I remember, like, how good he was at the school he was at. And then he transferred, and then he was also great at the school he went to, if that makes sense. A lot of these guys that transfer, I remember them after they transferred, but I don't really remember their first spot. I remember watching Wes Johnson when he was at Iowa State, and he was a killer. He was like all Big 12 freshman of the year, whatever it was, He was great at Iowa State under Greg McDermott. They sucked, though. The team was horrible. So he transfers to Syracuse, ends up winning 2010 Big East Player of the Year. Was pretty much like the 3rd best player in the country behind Evan Turner and John Wall that year. Those two guys were battling out for National Player of the Year, and Wesley Johnson kind of had the 3rd place locked up to himself.
Wes Johnson was on my list as my number 4, but now I'm going to knock him off and I'm going to put someone else at number 4.
All right.
Because I'm just like, there's too many honorable mentions to get to for this. But I like that. Wes Johnson, number 5. Number 4 for me is a guy that I feel like got lost in the shuffle in time. He's a big man, and his name is Cliff Rozier. And Cliff Rozier, my brother is a big fan of Cliff Rozier, my cousin Matt. He played 1 year at Carolina. He didn't play that much. I think it was 312 minutes. He remembered – it was the Draymond thing. Like, he remembered how many minutes he played for Dean Smith.
Yeah.
And so it was like 312 minutes, and then he goes to Louisville. I think they made a Sweet 16 with him as well, with Denny Crum. But he was Mr. Basketball in Florida.
Why did he transfer? Because he didn't play. Who was playing ahead of him?
I mean, I think it was Montrose.
Yeah.
It was like that George Lynch, Montrose, like that crowd. So there's a lot of bigs down there, Carolina.
Okay, all right. That's a good pick. Number 4 for me is TJ McConnell. Tate. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I'm not even gonna tease it. Let's just dive right in. TJ McConnell, Duquesne to Arizona. He's a Pittsburgh guy. He's Sean Miller's just pet project. A scrappy guy from Pittsburgh. He was at Arizona for 2 years. Tate goes to 2 Elite Eights, the 2 Elite Eight teams that lose to Wisconsin and Elite Eight both years. He won 67 games in 2 years. Tate, that's insane. I felt like I remember at the time being very passionate about this, that he should have won 2015 Pac-12 Player of the Year. I was very passionate about it.
Very passionate. Oh my God!
It ended up going to Joseph Young of Oregon, and I'm still like, as more time goes by, I get more upset about it, because I think what happened is TJ McConnell. He was coming on the heels of Aaron Kraft. And I think people had Aaron Kraft fatigue, and they looked at this guy and they said, this guy is just Aaron Kraft 2.0, which he's not. He could score. He could shoot. He's better than Aaron Kraft. And and I think everyone was just kind of over him, so he didn't get the respect he deserved.
All right, number 3 on my list is a guy that I think is very lost in the shuffle in time, but I learned a lot about him when I got to Los Angeles, because I tried to learn about LA high school hoops. And Fairfax High School's finest is a guy by the name of Chris Mills. And Chris Mills was a guy who he and Sean Kemp were both basically walking double-doubles together. They were best friends, and they were guaranteed as a package deal at one point to go to the University of Kentucky together. Sean Kemp, things happen. He does not go to Kentucky. Chris Mills does go to Kentucky. He averages a double-double his freshman year at Kentucky. And then there's some conversations that occur. Apparently, his father took $10,000 to get him to go to Kentucky.
That doesn't sound right. To Kentucky? That doesn't sound right.
This is all what happened in the report. And so Chris Mills, from that point on, is disqualified from playing for the University of Kentucky due to this. He decides to call up his old friend who was trying to recruit him to Arizona, Lute Olson. He goes to Arizona, the next year he's a sophomore, and he basically goes there and becomes a star. And Arizona was point guard U at the time, but he comes in, they're like the Tucson skyline. Chris Mills is playing great. The reason that Chris Mills is not remembered, even though he was a walking double-double in a total like LA, like I'm cool guy, big man on campus type dude. The reason is because he didn't win in the postseason. I think they made one Sweet 16 with him, which is a very, we joke all the time about the Elite Eight runs of Arizona. But Chris Mills was a great basketball player. He's an LA legend. If you start asking people around, like his name will come up, and you're kind of like, oh, who's this Chris Mills guy? And he is quote unquote a walking double-double.
He went to Fairfax?
He went to Fairfax High School.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
All right, number 3 for me is Scooney Penn Tate.
Yes.
This is not. I should make clear that this is not coming from a place of me being an Ohio State guy, because I did not cheer for Ohio State until I got to Ohio State. So this was not when I was watching Scooney Penn, I was not necessarily an Ohio State fan.
Yep.
That is why he belongs on my list, because he turned me into an Ohio State fan during the '99 season. He transfers from Boston College with Jim O'Brien. They win the '97 Big East tournament together. Then Jim O'Brien gets the Ohio State job. Scooney comes with him, sits out in '98. Then in '99, he wins Big Ten Player of the Year. They lose to UConn in the Final Four. Him and Michael Redd were absolutely electric. I think this was the first time I even realized that Ohio State had a basketball team. Like, I never really paid much attention to Ohio State whatsoever until '99 with Scooty Penn and Michael Redd. They were so fun to watch, and they played so well together. And Scooney's and then I got to know Scooney a little bit, and he's cool, and I really love him. So maybe I bumped him up a couple spots because of that. But no, he was absolutely electric to watch with Michael Redd. Those two guys were so awesome.
Number 2 for me, this is another one that was honestly, it's kind of a tragic miring of transfer situation, but John Lucas III, my favorite point guard, I think, of that year, probably 2004, when he hits the big shot, of course, against St. Joe's, and they go to the Final Four. He goes from Baylor. He was at Baylor originally for the Patrick Dennehy scandal that goes on there. He's a part of that whole team. He transfers to Oklahoma State with Eddie Sutton. And basically, John Lucas is a basketball name. Obviously, we know about that family and what the Lucas family has been able to do. But John Lucas III, he was 5'11". He was just a ball of energy. He was a lot of fun. He made great plays happen, out of nowhere. I was a little kid at the time. That I played with everyone that was older than me, all my brother's friends. So I was used to people blocking my shot. I was inspired by John Lucas III. And I know that it's kind of like the Baylor to OK State, transfer is not really one-to-one. It's not like he was, sitting there playing like a Rozier situation, and it was obviously a scandal or whatever. But still, John Lucas, that's number 2 of my transfer.
No, that counts. That qualifies. All right, number 2 for me is Marco Killingsworth, and he's number 2 on my list solely because Marco Killingsworth, for those who don't know, transferred from Auburn to Indiana. His first year eligible was the year after Bracy Wright left. Bracy Wright was like the weird era. I've gone over it on the podcast before. He was the Joseph Forte of Indiana. It was like just a weird, like, we're in a coaching transition. We're just going to hand the keys over to this guy that just like chucks it every time he gets it. But he's also like talented as hell. So like, I don't know.
It's fun, but it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, right. So the Bracy Wright era officially ends, and Indiana's got this big, just Shaq-looking dude, like he's mini Shaq, basically, left-handed guy from Auburn, named Marco Killingsworth. And there's a little hype around him, but no one really knew how good he actually was. And then in the 4th game of the year, Tate, the Duke Blue Devils, the number 1 ranked Duke Blue Devils, come to Assembly Hall. Marco Killingsworth drops like 30 and 10. Maybe it was more than 30 points. Maybe it was like 35 and 10. There's an 11-0 run. I remember I was at the game.
You have my full attention.
I was at that game. So I'm sitting at the very top row of Assembly Hall with my brother, who's a student, and I come down. He gets me a student ticket. We're standing at the top of the row. Marco Killingsworth hits the transition 3 where he pulls up and he catches a pass at the top of the key, just pulls it. And no one knew that this guy could shoot. Like, everyone's like, what the hell's going on? He makes it. The place goes absolutely nuts. Like 3 plays later, he caps off the 11-0 run to give Indiana the lead by dunking on Greg Paulus. It is the loudest I've ever heard Assembly Hall. I'll be honest with you. I'm not really sure what happened the rest of Marco Killingsworth's career. Literally the only reason I have him at number 2 is because that one game against Duke, they ended up losing the game. Duke ended up beating them. But it was like that one moment in time, I was like, this guy is the greatest.
This 11-0 run, you're like, this guy is amazing.
Like, it's number 1 Duke. Assembly Hall was I've been in Assembly Hall for some loud moments. That was the loudest I've ever heard. It was when Marco Killingsworth dunked on Greg Paulus. And that's why he's number 2. It's very, very biased pick, but I'll never forget it. And that's all I needed from him.
I think it's probably your number 1, so we can just talk about it together.
Yep.
I think it's pretty easy. Even if it is, our own list, it's Hank Gathers.
Yeah, that is who I had number 1. Yep.
Yeah, from USC to LMU, and of course, we're going to do our best to pigeonhole LMU into this program as much as possible as we try to, ride the coattails to success there. Hank Gathers built LMU. Bo Kimball built LMU. Hank Gathers is a great story, and he's an obvious number 1, right?
All-time package deal. Those guys came from Philadelphia. We're in high school together in Philly. Came out to USC to play for Stan Morrison. He gets fired after their freshman year. George Raveling takes over, basically kicks them off the team. He basically said, like, if you want to be a part of this team, you have to say you're a part of this team right now. And I think those guys were like, no, hang on a second. Like, give me some time to think about it. Like, whether we don't know you, guy. We came out here to play for someone else. Like, and then they basically like didn't sign. He gave him an ultimatum. They didn't sign soon enough. And then he's like, fine, I'm pulling your scholarships, and kind of forced them out the door. So they go to LMU. And then the rest is history. And we all know the story. Hank Gathers tragically passes away, but those guys were electric. It is so crazy to go back and watch the footage of that. They were so good and their stats were so high that like, and I know they ran the system and I know it was like inflated and all that, but like, it is crazy how you can almost average too many points because then it gets discredited. You know what I mean? Like, like when you look up Wilt Chamberlain's stats, you almost just gloss over them and they're not impressive because it's too much. Like if Wilt averaged like 36 points a game, you'd be like, damn, dude, that's really good. But Wilt averaged 46 and you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's like the competition isn't there. It's like Michael Jordan. Yeah. And Michael Jordan being able to average 37, people are like, man, like that's impressive.
Yeah, because you average so much, it's obvious that the competition wasn't good. And it's just like a cyclical.
But that's the thing. This was happening in the 90s. This isn't like the 60s or anything like that. That's why it's so insane.
They averaged 64 points a game between the two of them in 1990.
Yeah, like that's insane.
64 points and like 19 rebounds between the two of them.
That's so insane.
That's nuts. Yeah, they have to be the number 1. Gathers tragically dies. Kimball keeps they keep playing, which like, dude, you go back and think about that. That is, I mean, I know it's not like it's under the radar. Like people talk about it all the time, and that story has been rightfully given its due. But it still is just like so crazy. Just like keep revisiting it and thinking about it. That Hank Gathers like dies. They delay the game, and then they still continue playing like the NCAA tournament, which I don't know if they should or shouldn't have. I'm sure the players they did the talk and they said like Hank would have wanted us to play, all that kind of stuff. But just looking back on it, it's like, dude, can you imagine those guys like going out and playing when their teammate just died? Not just their teammate, but like the guy, like guy of the team.
I don't think it could happen in today's time just because of the ability for people to get in contact with the players and people. You know what I mean? It would just be too
Zion
much.
Williamson busted his shoe out and everyone acted like he died. And they were like, we got to cancel the season.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Hank Gathers literally died. And they were like, well, we'll keep playing. And then they beat the defending champs, Michigan. They wiped the floor with them in the second round. Yeah, that's an insane story. It gets crazier the more you look back on it. The older I get, the more it puts things in perspective. The more I look back on it, the more I'm like, yeah, that is like one of the greatest stories of all time.
Of all time. And if you go, I mean, we've watched games in LMU together. If you look up, you see, the Hank Gathers jersey hanging up there. And it's like, it makes that gym a special place. And obviously, like, Hank Gathers will always be, he's immortalized.
For the best access, perspective, and personalities in all of sports, follow us at Fox Sports on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.